Welcome to Postscript. Here we hope to answer your questions and help you dig deeper into the messages and sermons at Faithbridge by talking with the teacher of the day.
Welcome to Postscript. My name is Michael Sullivan, business administrator here at Faithbridge, and I'm joined by Duffy Robbins, who just brought us the first sermon of 2017, and it was a great one. Thanks, you,
sir.
Duffy.
Appreciate that.
You gave us really 2 points to look at as we kind of think about what's next, which is really on everybody's mind, rolling into a new year.
New school year, new year. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and so the first thing you talked to us about is it's not necessarily about the what, it's about the who.
Yeah.
And that is important, but I was sitting thinking, there's probably a lot of people out there who their what just feels so big right now. Could be with the new president coming in and just uncertainty there, just uncertainty in the world, as you pointed out, in Aleppo. There's uncertainty maybe with a job or with their family. So when these whats feel so big, how do you then practically get your attention focused on the who?
Yeah, great question. Totally legit question. And to be fair, I think, first of all, we got to recognize that the people to whom this vision was given, their what was pretty darn heavy as well. I mean, they were, as I said this morning, they were facing unbelievable persecution, and so for them to just, one has to be really careful about just being really flippant, guys. It's not about what, I think all of us understand at one level that's true, but right now, my wife has cancer. Right now, I can't find a job. Right now, my son is just going crazy. And those whats seem really, really big. And I don't think there's anything in Scripture that suggests that God doesn't want us to take seriously those whats. In other words, we're not living in Never Never Land. We have to pay attention to those issues. But part of it is saying, let's remember that the key in all this, and this is where these guys, John was, I think, trying to kind of encourage them, is remember, there's one who's on the throne, and it's not a Caesar, it's not Domitian, and that's where I have to trust. For example, Jeremiah 29, God says, "I know the plans I have for you," and the goodness of God, because otherwise it will just drive us crazy. Now, in practical terms. How do I deal with that? I think, first of all, recognize the power and the legitimacy of lament. In the Psalms, we have Psalms of lament. We have in the book of in the Bible a book of Lamentations, where the people of God are lamenting the situation in which they find themselves, and so there's nothing unspiritual or unfaithful or bad about lament. Even in Jesus' own life, we see lament reflected on the cross when he, cited these words from Psalm 22, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? So that's the first thing. Because I mention that because some people go, oh, well, you just, you're fixated on the what, it's about the who. And we can really hurt our brothers and sisters in Christ by sort of diminishing their struggle, diminishing their what, by saying, well, come on, snap out of it, focus on the who. Secondly, I think in addition to lament and practicing lament, community is critical. When we feel that we are carrying huge burdens, we do what we do anytime we're trying to carry something that's heavy and too big and too cumbersome. We say, hey, can you guys help me with this? And the problem is, we tend to go the other direction. We sort of shrink. We sort of get into our hole. We want to I'll when I get better, then I'll kind of get out there. That's one of the essential and wonderful ministries of a church, is that this is a place where we can bear one another's burdens. We can hurt together. To use Paul's metaphor of the body, if one part of the body hurts, we all suffer. And so I think that's another thing, is to make sure, just on practical terms, that we are involved Doesn't have to be everybody. You don't have to stand up and share this on Sunday morning, but there needs to be a group, a community of people that can help you carry that load. You wouldn't try to walk around and carry a piano by yourself. You can't carry some of these whats by yourself. They're too big, too cumbersome to do that on your own. And then I think thirdly is, and I'll just do this, comes out of James' first chapter, is that what God seems to say to us in the midst of our whats and our trials is that that they can be used as a way of bringing us to our knees or to our feet, as they were in Revelation chapter 4. That we actually ask God to use them as a way to deepen, to excavate places in our heart that have not yet been given to Him because we didn't need Him, you know. C.S. Lewis in The Problem of Pain talks about this whole idea that there's something about trial that deepens us. I'll recommend a book, and it's interesting because it's a book that talks about kingship, and that's one of the main themes in Revelation 4. It's a book by a guy named Gene Edwards, Gene Edwards, called The Tale of Three Kings. And it's a study, the subtitle is A Study in Brokenness. And I would recommend to people, I do recommend to people who are going through, hard whats, I'd say. It's a very small book. It's a short little book, too. But it's a study of the life of David and his situation of trying to live between Absalom and Saul. Some of the people you're talking about with hard whats, they have either a Saul for whom they're working or an Absalom with whom they're loving and living. And those are some of the most painful whats of all. So I would recommend that might be sort of a way, a tool that God could use to deepen our longing for Him, our sensitize our need for Him. That's the third way. Say, God, deepen in me. St. John of the Cross, his book, Dark Night of the Soul, is sort of a meditation on that. And I think that's the third way that God can use those whats. We can use those whats practically. What do we do with them? We don't just stuff them and say, oh no, if you really are focused on who you want to ask that. No, you will ask that. You should ask that. God's not afraid of that. In James, he says, if any of you lacks wisdom, ask God, but without doubting, because the person that doubts is like a double-minded person, they unstable in all their ways. But so I think that's kind of what we're to do with those whats.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because I think sometimes the natural inclination is to just try and brush past it. I don't need to sit in this. I'm just going to, muscle up and do this myself. And really, there, like you said, there is a time and a season for everything. There is a time to lament, and then to really have people around you who can help. And then, like you said, just pressing into the Lord and trusting that He's going to use this season for His good and His glory. I think that's really good. Well, the second part of your sermon, you really talked about in this season, it's not necessarily about how you respond to others, but it's about how you respond to Jesus. And you were kind of talking about, hey, in this time that John was writing, it was a difficult season for them, and there was some persecution going on, and many Christians today would probably say, hey, that's how I'm feeling right now. I am a social outcast at school or at work because of the beliefs that I have. They're viewed as old school, or that's dumb, or you're weak, or whatever the case. And sometimes that costs you maybe a promotion, or it costs you fitting in, or whatever the case may be. But there's probably some people who feel this tension right now, and it's even greater, obviously, in other countries, but even in the U.S. and our culture as well. So maybe can you speak to that? How do you deal with this tough culture right now?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and that's precisely why I wanted to sort of raise that point. That, and I don't mean necessarily how we respond to others. What I'm saying is how do others respond to us is not as important as how we respond to Jesus. How we respond to others is critically important. Sure. But a lot of times we excuse that, We excuse our response. We excuse our behavior because we say, "Well, look at the way these guys are treating me. Look at what they're doing." You know, I mean, they're bashing, you know, my candidate or bashing my beliefs, or and those again those hurts or those insults. I'm not saying that they're all that all those accusations and assaults are legit. They're not. A lot of them. Sure. What I'm saying, at the end of the day, it's not how they respond to us. It's going to be how we respond to Jesus in the midst of that stuff. Ultimately, he's the one on the throne, and it is to him to whom we must give account. But I think, so practically speaking, I mean, and I feel that way as much as the next guy, you know, I think the first thing I have to do, just practically speaking, be very, very cautious about social media. Now, I'm talking to myself here, but I know I have my default instinct is I've gotten better about curbing it, but my default instinct, as soon as I see something on Twitter or, you know, Facebook, is I want to put some sort of snarky comment on there. And this just happened this week where a guy, you know, criticized something, and I wanted so badly to say something, but I didn't. It wouldn't really have been engagement. It would have really have been just kind of, you know, striking back. It's not like, hey, let's try to reconcile. It's more like I want to just make this guy look stupid.
Yeah, one up him.
Yeah, and so that would be just from a practical standpoint. And for some people, that might, you know what, get rid of your Twitter account. Get rid of your, you know, yeah. Don't ever try to embrace discussion on Facebook. It's not a forum that really is suited to that. It's a forum that's suited to snarky comments. And this is where I think Christians have really hurt ourselves. We don't have to respond to every single time we feel, you know, slighted and shoved. You know, again, we go think about Jesus, you know, who was like a lamb led to the slaughter, and though reviled, he reviled not. And I think as hard as that is, and it's hard, that's the model, you know, for us. So I think that's one thing, is to really do an inventory, a stupidity inventory of your social media, you know, relationships and interactions. I think secondly is, you know, try to make, as a rule, try to make it more a question of gesture than posture. Andy Crouch, who is the author of two or three really awesome books. The first one was Culture Making by University Press. But Andy makes the point that we've sort of confused in the evangelical community the difference between gestures and postures. Postures are you know, what we have right now. We're in a sitting posture, and the guy that's running the camera is in a standing posture. And you know, the thing about postures is they tend to be the same. Gestures, on the other hand, can change to fit the situation. We get stuck in a posture, and so when you know, we have a position on something, we just kind of default to this posture. We're against it, we're angry, we're whatever. There are times when gestures of engagement and even rebuttal are totally appropriate. I mean, we have as much right to share ideas as the next person. But the problem is we tend to default to a posture where we're always angry, always upset. Here they go again. Instead of saying, no, wait, this is a posture. I don't need to remain in this posture. I can use these gestures if and when they are appropriate to me. And I think part of it is sort of looking at my life and maybe even asking people who know me and people who spend time with me, so, you know, what is my posture? What is my posture? Because maybe I've defaulted to these attitudes or these ways of being, and then I discredit the very ideas that I hope to champion. And then I guess thirdly is to recognize, and I think this is really, really important, the robust reality of sin. Because if you don't have a robust sense of the power and the nature of sin, you're going to be disappointed when people are sinful. And they will be, a lot. And when I say they, I mean you and me.
Yeah, sure.
And so, part of this, I think, understanding the robust, the depth and the breadth of the sin problem begins with a humble look at our own lives, recognize that, you know what, I've said stupid stuff even now, and how many stupid things I say before I knew Jesus. Part of this is just the problem of sin. This is why I need to love. This is why I need to try to reconcile. This is why I can't afford to break off the relationship. These people, they're lost. And if we only hang out with people who agree with us, then nobody else is ever going to get found. And so coming to terms with the depth and the problem of sin helps us to recognize, first of all, that we need to extend grace to those who are assaulting us. But secondly, that those people need, as we did and as we still do, they need to be rescued. They need to be saved by grace. So I think it's trying to cultivate that recognition. Otherwise, we're going to walk around really angry and disheartened and discouraged and disappointed. That's especially so in the church, I would say. I always tell my students, if you don't have a good, robust doctrine of sin, and you try to live in a community of Christians, you're going to be upset a lot.
Yeah.
But it's certainly true in the broader level as well. As soon as we start to engage, we're going to have that. And I'll just mention one more, and that is, I think, recognize the value of engaging with people who have different ideas, because maybe we're wrong, maybe on certain issues, or maybe we need to rethink, or maybe our position needs to be nuanced in some way. I don't like that. I'm not great at that, but I do think that I'm reading a book right now that's by a woman named DeFranz. I think it's called DeFranz, Megan DeFranz, called "Sex Difference in Christian Theology," and it's about a lot of these gender questions. A big fat book, and but there's quite a bit she says with which I have deep disagreement, but it's also kind of challenging me to think and rethink and sharpen my own position. So I think, at the end of the day, there's also a great value in just listening to those, even the ones who are kind of, we feel we're being attacked by.
Yeah, because I think, you were talking about social media, and I think a lot of times when we're on social media, the reason we have a posture and not a gesture is because you don't see that it's a real person with real feelings, right? And so sometimes...
And how much can you engage with 100 and whatever it is, 46 characters,
right.
Or just on Facebook? It's just, it's not, it's not really a forum for engagement. We sort of let the forum shape our engagement instead of saying, no, wait a minute, this is not the way people have engaged in generations before.
Yeah, it's a new ball game. Well, thank you, Duffy, for being here today. Thank you for helping us look into 2017, and thank you for joining us on Postscript. We'll be back next week as we kick off our Resolve for More series. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for joining us for Postscript. Help us keep the podcast interactive by submitting your questions during the morning services. Learn more at faithbridge.org/postscript.